Geography isn't just about maps and capitals. It's a genuine treasure chest filled with mind-blowing facts that will completely transform how you see our world. From a river so hot, it boils to a lake that looks like cotton candy. Let's embark on a journey together to the most fascinating and bizarre corners of our planet. Ready to have your mind blown? Let's dive in. Ever imagined a river with boiling water? Sounds like something from a movie, but it's real. The Shanai Timpishka, which in the local language means boiled by the heat of the sun, is tucked away deep in the Peruvian Amazon, and its waters can reach almost 220 meters. It's one of the hottest rivers in the world, and curiously, isn't located near any active volcano. The heat comes from deep geothermal fissures. Local residents consider this river sacred, and after hearing this, you probably would too. It's an impressive testament to nature's power and mystery, a reminder of the wonders our planet still holds. And you know what's even more incredible? Some extremophile organisms actually survive in these scalding waters, challenging what we understand about the limits of life. But if you think hot water is extraordinary, wait until you hear what's next. Ever thought about renting an entire country? In 2011, that was actually possible. Liechtenstein, that tiny nation nestled between Switzerland and Austria, could be rented for $70,000 per night. Just imagine, a welcome ceremony, the keys to the capital, and bragging rights for being king for a day. It's like having your own private country for a night. The package included wine tastings, sleigh rides, and even the possibility of temporarily renaming streets. While it's no longer possible to rent Liechtenstein today, this was one of the most exclusive and extravagant travel experiences ever offered. The curious thing is that the country is only about 62 square miles, smaller than many cities, but has embassies in various countries and is recognized by the UN. A true testament that size doesn't matter when it comes to national sovereignty. And speaking of geographic extremes, you won't believe the next destination we're about to explore. If you think the Sahara Desert is hot, you need to check out the Danakil Depression in Ethiopia. This is the planet's hottest place in terms of average annual temperature. Located in the Danakil Desert, this landscape seems otherworldly, with an average annual temperature of 95 degrees. But heat isn't its only impressive characteristic. Its colorful hot springs, mineral formations, and acid pools make the place truly look like an alien planet. It's such an extreme environment that scientists study it to understand how life could survive on other worlds. Beyond the high temperatures, the region has an extremely acidic pH and high concentrations of sulfur and salt, creating a combination of conditions that very few organisms can tolerate. However, even in this hostile setting, some extremophile bacteria thrive, expanding our understanding of life's limits on Earth and potentially on other planets. And if we're talking about extreme conditions, let's move to something equally impressive, but in a completely different way. Imagine a river so extensive that it passes through 10 different countries. This is the Danube, located in Central and Eastern Europe. It's the second longest river in Europe, winding through Germany, Austria, Slovakia, Hungary, Croatia, Serbia, Bulgaria, Romania, Moldova, and Ukraine. No other river in the world crosses so many countries. At 1,170 miles long, the Danube isn't just a crucial waterway, but also a cultural symbol that inspired composers like Johann Strauss II in his famous waltz, The Blue Danube. Throughout its history, the Danube has served as an important trade route, connecting the Black Sea to the heart of Europe. Today, it continues to be a vital artery for transportation, tourism, and water supply for millions of Europeans. The Danube's watershed is home to more than 80 million people, making it not just a geographical phenomenon, but a true axis of cultural diversity and international cooperation. But if you were impressed by this river, prepare yourself for the immensity of what comes next. When we talk about grandeur, the Pacific Ocean is in a category of its own. This aquatic colossus covers more than 63 million square miles. It's so vast that you could fit all of Earth's continents inside it and still have room for another Africa. To put it in perspective, you could travel from Los Angeles to Tokyo about 11 times, approximately 500 miles each trip, and still have more ocean to cross. The Pacific contains approximately 25,000 islands, more than all other oceans combined, and is home to the deepest point on Earth, the Mariana Trench, at nearly 7 miles deep. If Mount Everest were placed there, its peak would still be more than a mile below the surface. The volume of water in the Pacific is so great that it represents about 46% of all the water in the planet's oceans. It's hard to even imagine such magnitude, isn't it? Now, let's go from one extreme to another and talk about a place that, despite being wonderful, has a curious absence. Iceland is one of those places that has a little bit of everything nature can offer. Geysers, fascinating, waterfalls, geothermal hot springs. But there's one thing Iceland doesn't have: mosquitoes. Imagine a summer night without the annoying buzz of these insects. In Iceland, that's normal. Despite its many wetlands, the cold climate keeps mosquitoes away. So, if you hate mosquito bites, Iceland is the perfect place. The island's climate is characterized by long, extremely cold winters, with temperatures that frequently drop below freezing. Even during the short summer, nighttime temperatures can suddenly drop, creating an unstable environment for mosquito reproductive cycles. Additionally, Iceland's volcanic soil has chemical properties that can be hostile to mosquito larvae. This combination of factors has transformed Iceland into one of the few habitable places on the planet that remain free of these persistent insects. And if you think Iceland is interesting for not having mosquitoes, wait until you learn about the next destination that's fascinating for what it has in abundance. Alberta, Canada, is truly the dinosaur capital of the world. It's home to Dinosaur Provincial Park, one of Earth's richest fossil deposits. This UNESCO World Heritage Site has already revealed more than 300 dinosaur species and countless other prehistoric creatures from the late Cretaceous period, about 75 million years ago. What makes this place so special? During the dinosaur era, Alberta was a lush river delta, with perfect conditions for fossilization. Over time, sediment buried the dinosaur remains, preserving them in impressive detail. Today, Alberta continues to be a crucial spot for paleontological research, attracting scientists and tourists from all over the world who want to explore its rich prehistoric heritage. At the Royal Tyrrell Museum, you can see more than 130,000 odd fossils, including complete skeletons of Tyrannosaurus and Triceratops. Every year, new discoveries are made in this region, some completely changing our understanding of how dinosaurs lived, behaved, and evolved. If you're fascinated by dinosaurs, Alberta is a must-visit destination, where you can literally walk in the footsteps of these ancient giants. Speaking of names and locations, the next fact is a curiosity that confuses many people. Did you know that West Virginia isn't actually west of Virginia? Confusing, right? Even though it's called West Virginia, it doesn't extend as far west as Virginia itself. This happened because of how the states were formed long ago. Virginia was a huge state, and during the American Civil War, the northwestern part of the state separated because it disagreed with Virginia's secession from the Union. When some counties wanted to become their own state, they chose the name West Virginia. But even though they had been part of Virginia, they didn't take the westernmost part. It's like a bad naming decision that nobody ever corrected. In fact, Virginia's border extends about 90 miles further west than the westernmost point of West Virginia. This geographical confusion is a reminder of the complex historical and political events that shape the borders of modern American states. And if one geographical confusion is interesting, Imagine a river that completely changes color. Imagine a river that looks like pink bubblegum. This surreal spectacle can be seen at Cameron Falls in Waterton Lakes National Park, Canada. During the rainy season, a mineral called argillite mixes with the water, transforming the river's usual blue-green color into a vibrant pink. It's a truly captivating spectacle that attracts visitors from around the world. Argillite is a form of red clay rich in iron that gets deposited in the riverbed. When heavy rains increase the water flow, these sediments are stirred up and suspended, creating the stunning pink effect. This phenomenon typically lasts only a few hours or days, making it even more special and rare to witness. Although the exact reason for this phenomenon is still being studied, it's a testament to our planet's incredible diversity and beauty. Photographers and nature lovers from around the world plan trips specifically in the hope of capturing this fleeting moment when nature seems to paint with otherworldly colors. Speaking of notable bodies of water, the next fact takes us to a destination that's undergoing a worrying transformation. The Dead Sea, located in the Middle East between Jordan and Israel, is famous for its extreme salinity that allows people to float effortlessly. Due to its high salt content, the water is denser than regular seawater, making floating possible without any effort. It's like having a natural float. However, this unique body of water is facing a serious threat. It's shrinking at an alarming rate. Every year, the water level drops about 3 feet. The main causes of this decline are the diversion of water from the Jordan River, its primary source, and industrial mineral extraction. Satellite images show that the Dead Sea has lost more than a third of its surface since the 1960s. If it continues to shrink at this pace, future generations might have to call it the Dead Puddle. Beyond the loss of a unique natural treasure, the shrinking has caused more than 6,000 sinkholes in the region, craters that form when groundwater dissolves salt layers, causing the soil to collapse. Regional cooperation efforts to save the E223 Dead Sea are underway, but the challenge remains immense. And if size is the subject, you'll be surprised by the next comparison. Let's talk about scale. Russia, Earth's largest country, covers an impressive 6.6 million square miles of land. To put that in perspective, Pluto's total surface area is only 6.4 million square miles. That means Russia is bigger than Pluto. While Pluto was controversially downgraded to a dwarf planet in 2006, Russia still maintains its status as the largest territorial expanse in our world. To cross Russia from west to east, you would need almost an entire week of continuous train travel. That's 5,172 miles and 7 different time zones. Another impressive fact, Russia's border is so long that it could circle the Earth 1.5 times. And if you think you know the country, know that it shares land borders with 14 countries, including North Korea, China, Mongolia, Kazakhstan, Azerbaijan, Georgia, Ukraine, Belarus, Poland, Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, Finland, and Norway. An unparalleled geopolitical and cultural diversity. Speaking of giant countries, the next curiosity takes us to one of the world's largest nations with a peculiar detail. Despite being a massive country, all of China uses Beijing time. This decision was made in 1949 to promote national unity, but it creates some pretty unusual situations, especially for people living in the far west, like Xinjiang. It means the sun might rise at 6 a.m. in one city and at 10 a.m. in another. Imagine scheduling a national meeting. Lunch at noon could mean completely different things for people in different regions. In the western region of Xinjiang, for example, the local population often maintains an unofficial time that differs by 2 hours from Beijing's official time, simply to keep their daily routines aligned with the natural solar cycle. Interestingly, if China followed international time zone standards, the country would naturally have 5 different time zones. This single time zone policy is a fascinating example of how administrative decisions can override geographical realities, creating situations that challenge our conventional understanding of time and social organization. From time to space, our next fact takes us to Earth's highest point, which has an interesting political curiosity. The summit of Mount Everest isn't just Earth's highest point, it's also a natural international border. At 29,032 feet, 2 feet above sea level, the peak marks the dividing line between Nepal to the south and Tibet, China, to the north. So, when climbers reach the top, they're technically in 2 countries at once. No passport needed, just nerves of steel. This geopolitical division makes Everest unique among the world's highest mountains. Interestingly, this also means there are 2 main routes to the summit: the south route via Nepal and the north route via Tibet, China, each with its own challenges and regulations. The exact measurements of Everest's height have also been a source of dispute between the 2 countries until 2020, when they finally agreed on the official height of 29,031.7 feet. Each year, about 800 people attempt to climb Everest, but only about 70% reach the top, and everyone who makes it can say they've literally been between 2 nations at the same time. If a mountain between 2 countries is fascinating, the next fact takes us to a city with a serious geological problem. Mexico City was built on the soft, spongy bed of a drained lake, as groundwater beneath the city is pumped for its massive population. The land continues to sink up to 9 inches every year. Over the last century, some areas have sunk more than 30 feet. Imagine living in a city where the ground beneath you is literally disappearing. It's like a real estate nightmare. The city's Metropolitan Cathedral is a visible example of this phenomenon. Different parts of the building have sunk at different rates, causing noticeable tilts in its floors and walls. In some neighborhoods, you can see electrical poles that appear taller than they originally were, when in fact, it's the surrounding ground that has sunk. Engineers are working on solutions, but the scale of the problem makes it one of the world's most dramatic urban challenges. The city has implemented projects to collect rainwater and recharge aquifers, but the problem continues to worsen, especially with climate change intensifying droughts and increasing demand for groundwater. Speaking of countries with peculiar geography, the next fact takes us to a nation with a truly unusual shape. Chile is incredibly long, stretching over 2,670 miles from north to south. To put that in perspective, if you placed Chile along the west coast of the United States, it would extend from the northern tip of Alaska down to Baja California, Mexico. What's even more impressive is the incredible variety of landscapes you'd find along the way. In the north, you'd start in the Atacama Desert, the driest place on Earth, and end in the glaciers of southern Patagonia. And all of this is squeezed into a country so narrow that you could cross it from the Andes Mountains to the Pacific Ocean in just a few hours. It's as if Mother Nature decided to stack an entire continent vertically and call it Chile. Due to this unprecedented north-south extension, Chile experiences practically every climate found on Earth, except for tropical. In the same country, it's possible to ski in the mountains in the morning and surf in the ocean in the afternoon, or explore sand dunes in the north and glaciers in the south. This incredible geographic diversity makes Chile a natural laboratory for ecological studies and a paradise for outdoor adventure lovers. Speaking of curious borders, the next fact takes us to a city literally divided between 2 countries. Welcome to Derby Line, a town so unique it's literally split between the United States and Canada. The border runs right through homes, businesses, and even the local library. Imagine having breakfast in one country, then stepping into your living room in another. No passport required. The Haskell Free Library and Opera House is the most famous example. Its entrance is in the U.S., but most of the books and the opera stage are in Canada. It's known as the only library in the world with an actual international border running through it. Before tighter border controls took effect after 9/11, residents crossed freely between both sides. Even though surveillance has ramped up, folks here still share a strong sense of community that goes beyond national boundaries. The town's main road even changes names at the border, from Canusa Avenue in the US to Canusa Street in Canada, a subtle reminder of the political dividing line that, in everyday life, doesn't matter much to the locals who consider the entire area their home. And if you thought international borders were fascinating, get ready for a staggering population comparison. Australia's human population stands at roughly 26 million, but kangaroos outnumber them at over 50 million. That's almost a 2-to-1 ratio in favor of these hopping marsupials. So, if you're exploring the Australian outback, your chances of bumping into a kangaroo are far higher than running into another person. In fact, kangaroos are so plentiful, they're considered a national symbol, and sometimes a roadway hazard. Their booming numbers pose unique challenges. In certain regions, kangaroos are seen as agricultural pests, wreaking havoc on crops and competing with livestock for grazing land. Road accidents involving kangaroos, around 20,000 per year, can be dangerous for both drivers and the animals. It's ironic to think that the iconic creature featured on Australia's coat of arms and a huge draw for tourists is also labeled a pest in some parts of the country. Who would have guessed that the land down under is actually ruled by its original bouncing inhabitants? Speaking of intriguing population stats, our next stop is Japan, where there's a surprising demographic trend. In Japan, the number of household pets exceeds the number of children under 15. With an aging population and declining birth rates, there are around 20 million cats and dogs compared to just 15 million kids. This demographic shift is driven by a preference for smaller households and the rising costs of raising children. For many families, pets have become beloved companions, often treated like full-fledged family members. In fact, Japan is home to luxury hotels and spas designed exclusively for pets. Seriously, dogs over there are living the high life. This trend reflects broader social changes, including long work hours, compact urban apartments, and the growth in people living alone. An entire industry has sprung up to cater to this phenomenon, from designer pet clothing and specialized pet strollers to cat cafes and even elaborate pet funeral services. It's a fascinating example of how demographic shifts can reshape a society's culture and economy. Moving from society and population to national philosophy, our next destination has a truly unique measure of success. Nestled in the eastern Himalayas between India and China, Bhutan is a small kingdom with a big idea. Happiness takes priority over wealth. While most countries focus on GDP to measure progress, Bhutan uses gross national happiness, GNH, a distinctive philosophy that values well-being, cultural preservation, and environmental sustainability. It's a peaceful reminder that progress isn't just about the size of your economy, it's about the quality of your happiness. Bhutan's government regularly surveys citizens' well-being across 9 domains: living standards, health, education, good governance, time use, community, vitality, psychological well-being, cultural diversity, and ecological resilience. Policies at all levels are weighed for their contribution to GNH, not just economic growth. This holistic approach has led to some remarkable decisions. Bhutan is the only carbon-negative country in the world, absorbing more CO2 than it emits, and its constitution mandates that at least 60% of the nation remains forested at all times. In a world hooked on economic expansion, Bhutan invites us to rethink what it really means to be developed. From philosophical depth to literal depth, our next destination holds a world record that'll blow your mind. Located in Siberia, Lake Baikal is not only the planet's deepest lake, it's a true natural wonder. Plunging to over 5,300 feet, about 1,600 meters, it holds roughly 20% of the world's unfrozen fresh water. That's more water than all of North America's Great Lakes combined. But Baikal's astounding depth isn't its only claim to fame. It's also the oldest lake on Earth, an estimated 25 million years old, and home to thousands of unique species, including the Baikal seal, the only freshwater seal on the planet. The lake is so exceptionally clear that, on calm days, you can see up to 130 feet, about 40 meters, beneath the surface. Baikal is also famous for an amazing winter phenomenon. Massive methane bubbles get trapped in the ice, creating a pattern that looks like giant jewels embedded in the frozen water. Over 80% of the 2,500 species living here are found nowhere else on Earth, earning Baikal the nickname Russia's Galapagos. With such diversity and unique features, it's no wonder it's a UNESCO World Heritage Site. From natural wonders to human oddities, our next destination boasts one of the quirkiest place names in the United States. Ever thought about living in a place called Chicken? Yep, there's a tiny town in Alaska that proudly embraces this unusual name. And the story behind it is as hilarious as you'd imagine. Back in the late 1800s, local miners wanted to honor the ptarmigan, a local bird that resembles a chicken. But nobody could agree on how to spell ptarmigan. Rather than risk a colossal spelling fail, they took the easy way out and called it chicken. Today, this little community has run with the joke in style. Everything's chicken-themed, from signs to souvenirs, turning the town's quirky name into a true hallmark. If you visit during summer, you can even join the annual Chicken Days Festival, where locals and tourists gather for games, food, and, naturally, countless chicken jokes. It's a fun reminder that sometimes simplicity can create something truly unforgettable. And speaking of surprises, you won't believe the linguistic diversity of our next destination. The most linguistically diverse place on Earth is Papua New Guinea, with over 800 languages spoken. That's around 12% of all the world's languages in one country. What makes this even more mind-blowing is that Papua New Guinea's population is just about 9 million. To put that in perspective, consider the entire European Union, with its 27 countries and nearly 450 million people, has only around 24 official languages. Papua New Guinea alone has dozens of times that number. Incredible. This linguistic richness has roots in the country's rugged terrain. Dense rainforests, highlands, and isolated villages created natural barriers, allowing distinct languages to evolve over time. Some languages are spoken by just a few hundred people, making them among the rarest forms of communication on Earth. Many of these languages feature unique characteristics you won't find in more widely spoken tongues, like number systems, based on body parts or tonal shifts that can completely change a word's meaning. Linguists from all over the globe flock here to study this living laboratory of language evolution. However, globalization and digital communication are threatening these languages. It's estimated that half of them could vanish by the end of this century. That's why local and international groups are working hard to document and preserve this invaluable cultural heritage. And if you thought linguistic diversity was remarkable, wait until you find out how a massive country manages to survive without something most civilizations consider essential. Saudi Arabia has one truly astonishing characteristic. Despite spanning over 830,000 square miles, about 1 million square kilometers, it doesn't have a single permanent river. Not one. Instead, the nation relies on underground aquifers, ancient water reserves buried beneath the desert, and cutting-edge desalination plants to provide drinking water. It's a testament to human ingenuity, transforming seawater into fresh water for millions of people. The scale of desalination here is staggering. Saudi Arabia operates some of the largest plants on the planet, like Ras Al Khair, which churns out more than 264 million gallons, 1 billion liters, of potable water per day. It's an energy-intensive process, but with abundant oil reserves, the country has found a way to make it work. While most places build cities around rivers, Saudi Arabia has mastered thriving without them. Ancient civilizations in the region developed rainwater collection systems known as falaj, some of which are still used today. And in recent years, the nation has poured resources into water conservation technologies and low-water agriculture. It's proof that necessity is indeed the mother of invention. And speaking of ancient things that stand the test of time, do you know which currency is the oldest still in use? The British pound sterling holds the title of the world's oldest currency still in circulation, dating back over 1,200 years. It was introduced around 725 AD as silver coins during the Anglo-Saxon era in England. The word pound, originally, referred to the weight of 240 silver coins, exactly 1 pound of silver. That's where the eti symbol comes from, a stylized L for the Latin word libra. Pretty neat, right? Over the centuries, the currency evolved from silver coins to include gold coins, and later the paper notes we use today. During the IBED Middle Ages, the pound sterling was so trusted it was used as a trade standard across much of Europe, well before the concept of a global currency existed. It has weathered wars, revolutions, economic collapses, and even the digital age. Today, despite the UK's exit from the European Union, the pound sterling remains one of the world's strongest and most stable currencies, a symbol of continuity in the ever-changing world of global finance. The Bank of England, established in 1694, is the second oldest central bank in the world and continues to safeguard this historic currency. Modern pound notes feature some of the most advanced security measures around, blending a millennium of tradition with cutting-edge technology. And while some things endure beautifully over time, our next topic highlights a far more troubling type of permanence. Floating in the Pacific Ocean is a colossal collection of plastic debris spanning roughly 600,000 square miles, about 1.6 million square kilometers, over twice the size of Texas. And it's not just a surface problem. This ever-growing gyre of garbage extends deep into the water, forming a plastic soup in multiple layers. Shaped by ocean currents known as gyres, the Great Pacific Garbage Patch is a stark reminder of how human activity can affect even the most remote corners of our planet. It's surreal to think we've created a permanent oceanic feature out of irresponsibly discarded plastic. The scariest part? Contrary to popular belief, it's not a solid island you can walk on. It's primarily made up of microplastics, particles, under 5 millimeters in size, which are often invisible to the naked eye but easily ingested by marine life. Recent studies suggest over 700 marine species are already impacted by this debris. Scientists and environmentalists are pursuing cleanup efforts like the Ocean Cleanup Project, which uses floating barriers to capture plastics. But it's an enormous task, and the patch keeps growing. Around 8 million tons of plastic enter our oceans every year. That's like dumping a truckload of trash into the sea every minute. The silver lining is that awareness is on the rise. Over 170 countries have pledged to cut back on single-use plastics in the coming years. Small changes in our daily habits can have a huge collective impact. And speaking of nature's power, let's check out a place where volcanic activity has created a stunning black sand beach. Ever seen a black sand beach? Located in Iceland, Reynisfjara looks like it's straight out of a fantasy novel. Its coal-black sand is the result of volcanic rock and eroded lava, a nod to Iceland's fiery geological past. But it's not just the color of the sand that makes this beach special. The scenery is a dramatic blend of crashing white waves, towering basalt columns, and lush green cliffs. The contrast between the jet-black sand and the frothy white surf is almost hypnotic. Adding to the beach's mystique are the local legends tied to the basalt sea stacks. Folklore says these pillars were once trolls that turned to stone when the sun rose, because in Norse mythology, trolls turn to rock if exposed to sunlight. Reynisfjara isn't just visually captivating, it's also a geological marvel. The hexagonal basalt formations along the coast form as lava rapidly cools, creating perfectly geometric patterns. It's as though Mother Nature wields a compass. If you plan to visit, be cautious. Reynisfjara is as dangerous as it is beautiful. Its sneaker waves, unexpectedly large waves that can appear even on calm days, have led to fatal accidents. Tourists are strongly advised to keep a safe distance from the shoreline. And, if natural forces impress you, wait until you hear how one forest literally helps us all breathe. The Amazon produces about 20% of the world's oxygen, making it an essential part of Earth's life support system. Its millions of trees absorb carbon dioxide and release oxygen through photosynthesis, helping regulate our planet's atmosphere and combat climate change. But it's not just about oxygen. The Amazon also influences global weather patterns, releasing massive amounts of moisture into the atmosphere and generating rainfall that nourishes ecosystems thousands of miles away. Known as flying rivers, these atmospheric currents carry more water than the colossal Amazon River itself, the largest river by discharge in the world. The Amazon's biodiversity is staggering. Hosting 10% of all known species, it's home to over 40,000 plant species, 2,200 fish, 1,300 birds, 427 mammals, 428 amphibians, and 378 reptiles. And that's just what we've cataloged. Scientists believe countless more species remain undiscovered. No wonder people call it the lungs of the planet. It's literally breathing life into Earth, one tree at a time. Unfortunately, deforestation is a serious threat. Every minute, an area roughly the size of 30 soccer fields is lost. Preserving this natural treasure isn't just an environmental issue, it's crucial for our own survival. Indigenous communities who have lived in the Amazon for thousands of years have proven to be its best guardians. Studies show that regions under indigenous protection have significantly lower deforestation rates than other areas. Picture this: the scorching Sahara Desert covered in snow. Sounds impossible, but it does happen. One of the hottest, driest places on Earth occasionally transforms into a winter wonderland that looks straight out of a movie. The most recent occurrence was in 2022, when the Golden Dunes turned white in a surreal contrast that shocked everyone. How does this happen? When cold air from Europe meets moist air from North Africa, and temperatures drop low enough, you get this jaw-dropping natural display. It's worth noting that snowfall doesn't blanket the entire Sahara. Mainly the higher elevations and mountainous regions, such as the Atlas Mountains in Morocco, which can rise over 13,000 feet, 4,000 meters. In these spots, winter nighttime, temperatures frequently dip below freezing, setting the stage for this rare phenomenon. And it's nothing new. Historical records mention snow sightings in the Sahara going back centuries, but now we have photos and videos circulating worldwide to prove it. This striking juxtaposition reminds us that nature always has a wild card, even in places we think we know inside and out. Speaking of nature's surprises, have you heard of Okunoshima? This tiny Japanese island is nicknamed Rabbit Island for the most obvious reason. It's literally overrun by bunnies. These furry little residents roam free, hopping around everywhere and eagerly approaching visitors for snacks and cuddles. It's practically impossible to walk 2 steps without being surrounded by a crowd of irresistibly cute rabbits. But there's a twist behind this adorable facade. Okunoshima has a dark past. During World War II, It was a secret center for chemical weapons production. The Japanese government even erased the island from official maps to maintain secrecy. After the war, the story goes that rabbits, possibly once used for testing, were released or brought here as a symbol of renewal. Today, the only kind of attack you'll face is a friendly ambush of adorable fluff balls. The island is now a peaceful tourist spot, featuring a small museum that preserves its difficult history, while the rabbit population, now over 1,000 strong, serves as the cutest ambassadors of peace you'll ever see. If you plan a visit, make sure to pack some carrots and greens. These bunnies have perfected the art of convincing tourists to share their snacks. And speaking of disputes that ended with a surprising twist, could you imagine a territorial dispute settled with alcohol? That's exactly what happened between Denmark and Canada over Hans Island, a small, uninhabited rock in the Nares Strait between Greenland, a Danish territory, and Canada. Covering a mere half-square mile, this seemingly insignificant chunk of land sparked one of the friendliest border disputes in history. The so-called Whiskey War began in the 1980s when both countries staked their claims. Whenever officials from one side visited, they would plant their national flag and leave a gift for the other. The Canadians left bottles of whiskey, while the Danes retaliated with schnapps, a traditional Scandinavian spirit. This light-hearted back and forth was accompanied by playful notes like, "Welcome to Canada," or "Welcome to Denmark." Though this fun exchange was mostly symbolic, there were real implications for fishing, navigation, and potentially valuable resources in the Arctic region. Yet instead of military tension, both countries embraced a diplomatic approach that became a global example of peaceful resolution. In 2022, after more than 4 decades of this boozy conflict, the dispute officially ended with a deal splitting the island in half, turning it into a shining symbol of peaceful collaboration. If only all territorial disputes could be handled with such humor and civility. And there you have it, 30 fascinating geographical facts from around the world that you might never have guessed. From quirky towns to jaw-dropping records, our planet is filled with curiosities just waiting to be discovered. If you learned something new today, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that notification bell so you don't miss any of our upcoming global adventures. This Earth of ours is packed with incredible mysteries, and I can't wait to share more of them with you. Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring this amazing planet we all call home.